The text came at 2:17 a.m. For simple words that would change everything, it hurts so much. David Miller stared at his phone, heart racing. The number wasn't saved in his contacts. It was clearly meant for someone else. But something about those words, the raw vulnerability in that simple phrase, wouldn't let him ignore it. What happened next would break him completely, then rebuild him in ways he never imagined possible. And for Eliza Bennett, a stranger on the other end of that misdirected text, it would become the night that saved her life. If you're moved by stories of unexpected connections that change lives forever, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us how a single moment of kindness can ripple through generations. David Miller had mastered the art of functioning on minimal sleep. 6 years of single parenthood had trained him well. His daughter Sophie's nightmares had become less frequent as she approached her 10th birthday, but tonight had been rough. After finally getting her back to sleep, he'd been scrolling mindlessly through his phone when the text arrived. It hurt so much. He stared at the unknown number, thumb hovering over the screen. Probably a wrong number. Probably someone texting their doctor, or partner, or friend. Not his business, but what if it wasn't? David had spent the last 6 years raising Sophie alone after his wife's sudden death. The memory of those first few months, the crushing weight of grief, the nights he'd texted his dead wife's number just to feel less alone, was still raw. He knew what it meant to hurt and have nowhere to turn. That he typed back, "I think you have the wrong number, but are you okay?" 3 minutes passed. Then 5. He was about to set the phone down when it buzzed again. "I'm sorry. Wrong number. Don't worry about it." Something in the brevity, the dismissal, felt wrong. David couldn't explain it, but a chill ran down his spine. He thought about Sophie sleeping peacefully down the hall, about the promise he'd made at her mother's funeral to be the kind of person who made the world better, not war. "Look, I don't know you, but if you're in trouble or hurting, I'm awake anyway. No pressure, but sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger." The response came faster this time, "Why would you care? You don't know me." "Because someone once cared when I was at my lowest." Pay it forward, right? The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I don't think anyone can help with this." David sat up straighter in bed. "Try me." Across town, Eliza Bennett sat on the bathroom floor of her small apartment, back against the cold tile wall. The pregnancy test lay on the counter, its 2 pink lines mocking her. She'd meant to text her sister, the only person who knew she was taking the test tonight, but had misdialed in her emotional state. Now some stranger was offering to listen, and she was actually considering it. That's how desperate she felt. Her fingers trembled as she typed, "I just found out I'm pregnant. The father left last month. Said he wasn't built for commitment. I'm alone, I'm scared, and I don't know what to do." She hit send before she could change her mind, then immediately regretted it. What was she doing, spilling her life to a complete stranger? They could be anyone, some creep, some judgmental jerk, some. The reply came, "First, take a deep breath. You're not alone in this moment, I'm here. Second, whatever you're feeling right now is valid. Third, you have options and time to figure this out. I've been a single parent for 6 years. It's hard, but possible." Eliza stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. She hadn't expected kindness. She hadn't expected understanding. "I can't do this," she typed. "I can barely support myself. I work 2 jobs already. My apartment is tiny. I have no family except my sister, and she's struggling too. I'm not ready." "No one ever feels ready," came the reply. "When my wife died, leaving me with our 4-year-old daughter, I thought I'd collapse under the weight of it all. I'm not telling you what to do, that's entirely your choice. I'm just saying that whatever you decide, you're stronger than you think." David wasn't sure why he felt so invested in this stranger's crisis. Maybe it was the late hour breaking down normal boundaries. Maybe it was recognizing the same desperation he'd once felt. Or maybe it was simply that helping someone else's pain momentarily dulled his own. The conversation continued, message after message. He learned her name was Eliza. That she was 28, working as a waitress and taking online classes. That her parents had died in a car accident when she was in college. That her ex had seemed perfect until he wasn't. How did you do it? She asked. Raise a child alone? David thought carefully before answering. One day at a time. With help, friends, neighbors, a support group for single parents. I learned to ask for help, which was the hardest part. I stopped trying to be both parents and just focused on being the best dad I could be. I'm scared of failing this child before they're even born. That fear? That's actually a good sign. Bad parents don't worry about being bad parents. As the night deepened, their conversation shifted. David shared stories about Sophie, her first steps, her obsession with space, her recent science fair project on bioluminescent creatures. Eliza told him about her dreams of finishing her degree in education, of teaching elementary school someday. It's 4:30, Eliza finally wrote. I should try to sleep. I have a shift at 10. Get some rest, David replied. And Eliza? Whatever you decide, it'll be okay. Thank you for answering a wrong number text. It meant more than you know. David set his phone down, exhausted but somehow lighter. He checked on Sophie, tucking the blanket around her shoulders before returning to his own bed. He didn't expect to hear from Eliza again. These midnight confessions often evaporated in the harsh light of day. The morning sun filtered through David's bedroom curtains, waking him after barely 3 hours of sleep. His mind immediately returned to the stranger, to Eliza, and her midnight crisis. He wondered if she was okay, if she'd managed to get any rest before her shift. The urge to text her again was strong, but he resisted. She hadn't asked for a new friend, she'd needed a momentary lifeline. He'd provided that. It was enough. Sophie burst into his room, already dressed for school in mismatched socks and a shirt that was definitely on backward. Daddy! I'm hungry and we're out of the good cereal. David groaned dramatically, making Sophie giggle as he pulled himself out of bed. The good cereal? You mean the sugar bombs that your dentist specifically asked me not to buy anymore? Those are the ones. Sophie nodded enthusiastically. Well, we'll have to make do with eggs today, kiddo. He ruffled her hair as they headed to the kitchen. As he cracked eggs into a bowl, David found himself thinking about Eliza again. What would it be like for her, facing pregnancy alone? He remembered those early days after Lisa's death, the bone-deep exhaustion, the constant fear of making the wrong decisions, the crushing loneliness of parenting without a partner. Dad, you're spilling egg on the counter, Sophie pointed out. Sorry, Spacey this morning. He wiped up the mess. Hey Soph, remember how we always say that kindness matters? Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She recited their family motto with pride. Well, last night I got to practice that. Someone texted me by accident, and they were having a really tough time. Sophie's eyes widened. Like a wrong number? Was it a bad guy? No, just someone who needed someone to talk to. And it reminded me how important it is that we're there for people, even strangers sometimes. Sophie considered this while chewing her eggs. Like when Mia was new at school and no one would play with her, but I did, and now she's my best friend? David smiled. Exactly like that. 3 days passed. David had almost managed to put Eliza out of his mind when his phone buzzed with a text from her number. I had my first prenatal appointment today. I'm keeping the baby. His heart did a strange little flip. He hadn't expected to hear from her again, and certainly hadn't expected this decision. He typed back, that's a brave decision. How are you feeling? Terrified. Excited. Nauseous. All of the above. David smiled at his phone. All normal. The nausea should ease up in the second trimester. At least that's what my wife used to say. Your wife. I'm sorry about your loss. You mentioned she died, but I was so wrapped up in my own drama I didn't even acknowledge it. David stared at the message, surprised by how much it meant to have someone recognize his grief, even now, 6 years later. Thank you. Her name was Lisa. Car accident. Sophie was 4. That must have been devastating. For both of you. It was. Still is, sometimes. But we're okay. Sophie barely remembers her mom now, which breaks my heart all over again. I keep photos everywhere, tell her stories, but memories fade. You're doing the most important thing, keeping her mother's love alive. That's what matters. David felt a lump in his throat. How had this stranger managed to say exactly what he needed to hear? Thank you for that. Now, enough about my ancient history. How are you doing? Do you have support for this journey? Their conversation flowed easily after that. David offered practical advice about pediatricians, childproofing, and the best brands of diapers. Eliza sent him links to articles about child development she was studying in her education courses. They texted almost daily. Sometimes just quick check-ins, sometimes longer conversations about their days, their fears, their hopes. David found himself looking forward to her messages, planning his responses during quiet moments at work. Is this weird? Eliza texted one evening. That we've never met, but I feel like I can tell you anything. Definitely weird, David replied. But good weird. Sometimes it's easier to be honest with someone who doesn't have preconceptions about who you are. Exactly. My sister keeps treating me like I'm this fragile thing now. And my friends either think I'm making a huge mistake or they're planning baby showers already. No one just lets me be. Well, I'm happy to be your weird text friend for as long as you need one. 2 months into their strange friendship, David's phone rang at 11 p.m. It was Eliza's number. They'd never actually spoken on the phone before, only texted. His stomach clenched with immediate concern. Hello, he answered. David? Her voice was tight with pain. I'm sorry to call so late. I'm having severe cramps and bleeding. The nurse line said to go to the emergency room, but my sister's out of town, and I don't have anyone to drive me. I tried calling a rideshare, but there's a surge, and I can't afford. Text me your address, he said without hesitation. I'll be there as soon as I can get my neighbor to stay with Sophie. He was already pulling on jeans, grabbing his keys. Mrs. Abernathy next door was a night owl who had helped with Sophie emergencies before. He called her while heading downstairs. Of course I'll come over, she said. Is everything all right? A friend is having a medical emergency. I need to drive her to the hospital. 20 minutes later, David was knocking on the door of a small apartment in a complex across town. When it opened, he had his first glimpse of the woman he'd been texting for months. Eliza was younger than he'd imagined, with dark curly hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was pale with pain, one arm wrapped protectively around her middle. She wore sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, and her eyes, deep brown and filled with fear, widened when she saw him. You came, she whispered, as if she hadn't quite believed he would. Of course I came. Can you walk to the car or should I help you? I can walk. Just, slowly. David resisted the urge to scoop her up and carry her. Instead, he offered his arm for support, feeling her trembling as they made their way to his car. The drive to the emergency room was tense. Eliza sat with her eyes closed, breathing through waves of pain. David kept glancing over, helplessness washing through him. We're almost there, he said softly. Just hang on. At the hospital, he helped her to the registration desk, then sat beside her in the waiting area, his hand hovering near hers, unsure if touch would be welcome from someone she'd never actually met before tonight. Eliza solved his dilemma by reaching for his hand during a particularly bad cramp, squeezing so hard he winced. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "Don't be. Squeeze as hard as you need to." When they finally called her name, she looked at him with panic. Would you mind waiting? I don't want to be alone." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. 3 hours passed before a nurse approached him. "Are you David? Eliza's asking for you." He followed the nurse through swinging doors and down a corridor to a curtained area. Eliza lay on a hospital bed, an 4 in her arm, her face streaked with dried tears. "I lost the baby," she said simply when she saw him. David felt his throat tighten. He'd been there 6 years ago when the doctor had told him his wife wouldn't survive her injuries. He recognized the hollow shock in Eliza's eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said, taking the chair beside her bed. "They called it a spontaneous abortion. Such a clinical term for something that feels like my heart is being ripped out." Her voice broke. "I didn't even want this baby at first. And now I'd give anything." David reached for her hand, and she gripped it like a lifeline. "I know," he said softly. "I know." They sat in silence for a long time. David remembered the deafening quiet of the hospital room where Lisa had died, how the world had seemed to stop spinning, how breathing itself had become a conscious effort. "They want to keep me overnight for observation," Eliza finally said. "You should go home to Sophie." "Are you sure? I can call Mrs. Abernathy again." Eliza shook her head. "You've done more than enough. I can't believe you came at all, honestly. We're practically strangers." David looked at their joined hands. "I don't think we are, though." "Not really." Fresh tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks. "Thank you. For everything. I'll come back tomorrow to drive you home," he said, standing reluctantly. "Is there anything you need from your apartment? Comfortable clothes? Toothbrush?" The look of surprise on her face broke his heart a little. Had no one ever offered her such simple kindness before? "That would be amazing," she admitted. "My keys are in my purse." The next morning, David arrived at the hospital with a small overnight bag containing the items Eliza had requested, plus a few extras, a soft throw blanket he'd found in her linen closet, a paperback from her bedside table, and a chocolate bar he'd picked up at the store. He found her sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, already dressed in the hospital-issued scrubs, looking small and lost. "Delivery service," he announced, trying to keep his tone light. The smile she gave him was weak but genuine. "My hero." While she changed in the bathroom, David spoke with the discharge nurse, collecting prescriptions and aftercare instructions. When Eliza emerged in her own clothes, some color had returned to her cheeks. "Ready to go home?" he asked. She nodded, but her eyes filled with tears again. "I don't want to be alone right now," she admitted in a whisper. "Then you won't be," David said simply. "We can stop by my place first. Sophie's been dying to meet you anyway." "She knows about me?" "Of course. I told her how we met, how you're going through a tough time. She's been asking when she gets to meet my text friend." For the first time since he'd met her in person, Eliza laughed. "Text friend. I like that." The drive to David's house was quiet but comfortable. Eliza gazed out the window, occasionally wiping away a stray tear, but the acute grief of the night before had settled into something more manageable. "Your neighborhood is beautiful," she commented as they turned onto his tree-lined street. "It's a good place to raise a kid. Good schools, safe streets, neighbors who actually know each other's names." David pulled into the driveway of a modest 2-story home with a small front garden. As they approached the front door, it flew open. Sophie stood there, bouncing with excitement. "You're Eliza. Dad's text friend." I'm Sophie and I'm almost 10 and I've been waiting forever to meet you. Eliza couldn't help but smile at the girl's enthusiasm. It's nice to meet you too, Sophie. Dad said you're not feeling well, so I made you a get well card and Mom's special tea. Dad says it fixes everything. Eliza glanced at David, who shrugged with a sad smile. Lisa's remedy for everything was chamomile tea with honey and lemon. Sophie keeps the tradition alive. Something warm unfurled in Eliza's chest as she followed Sophie into the kitchen. This house felt like a home, lived in, loved, filled with memories both happy and sad. The days that followed changed everything. Eliza found herself spending more time at David and Sophie's house than her own apartment. What began as David checking on her recovery evolved into dinners together, movie nights, helping Sophie with homework. You don't have to keep taking care of me, Eliza told David one evening as they washed dishes side by side. I'm okay now. I know, he said, handing her a plate to dry. But we like having you around. Sophie especially. I like being around too, she admitted. More than I should, probably. David set down the dish he was washing and turned to face her. What does that mean? Eliza took a deep breath. It means I'm afraid of getting too comfortable here. Of forgetting this isn't actually my life. My family. What if it could be? David asked quietly. 6 months later, Eliza moved in officially. Her tiny apartment had never felt like home the way David's house did. The way David and Sophie did. On the anniversary of that first wrong text, David proposed in the backyard garden Sophie had helped plant. You texted the wrong number, he said, kneeling before her, but somehow found exactly the right person. Their wedding was small, just close friends and family. Sophie served as both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her duties extremely seriously. Are you ready? David asked Eliza as they prepared to walk down the makeshift aisle in their garden. Eliza thought about the journey that had brought them here, a desperate text on a dark night, a hospital room where she'd lost one dream but found another, a house that had become her home, a child who had become her daughter in every way that mattered. I've been ready since you answered a text you could have ignored, she said, taking his hand. As they walked toward their future together, Eliza marveled at how life's deepest wound sometimes led to its greatest healing. One wrong text had changed everything, breaking her completely, then rebuilding her in ways she never could have imagined. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Remember that compassion costs nothing but can change everything. One text, one moment of kindness, one decision to reach beyond ourselves, these are the actions that transform lives. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.